Well, good evening, everyone. As we get all mic'd up, we'll go ahead and get the program started. On behalf of Georgetown's Institute of Politics and Public Service, welcome. At GU Politics, we like to say that public service is a good thing. Politics can be too. Connecting students directly with political leaders who embody this notion to understand how politics is done, but more importantly, how it can be done better, is central to our mission. So to that end, we could not be more thrilled to host such a distinguished panel today to take us all inside the East Wing. It's especially fitting, I think, to be hosting this all-star, all-female panel on the topic of First Ladies and their Chiefs of Staff as we close out Women's History Month this March. I'd like to take a minute to thank all of our partners that made this event possible, starting with Ambassador Meland Revere and the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security, the Beyond D. Copeland Family Fund of the Georgetown Women's Center, the Georgetown Women's Alliance, the Women in Public Policy Initiative of the McCourt School of Public Policy, Georgetown Women in International Affairs, and GU Women in Leadership. A pretty good lineup. I'd like to turn it over now to Cece Borzilleri, a freshman in the college, who's going to formally introduce the panel.
My name is Cece Borzilleri. I'm a freshman in the college and a member of the GU Politics Operations team. I love the level of behind-the-scenes access that GU Politics gives to Georgetown students, and events like the one we have this evening are great examples of the unique Georgetown opportunities that GU Politics has been able to facilitate throughout their inaugural year. The depth and breadth of speakers and events through GU Politics allows people with interest in politics at any level to get hands-on experience with the field, and these experiences have been some of my favorite Georgetown memories so far. With us tonight is a panel of ladies to give us a look inside the East Wing of the White House. Anita McBride is the executive in residence at the Center for Congressional and Presidential Studies in the School of Public Affairs at American University. Ms. McBride previously served as assistant to President George W. Bush and chief of staff to First Lady Laura Bush from 2005 to 2009. Directing the staff's work on the wide variety of domestic and global initiatives in which Mrs. Bush was involved. Her White House service spans 2 decades and 3 presidential administrations, including as Director of White House Personnel under Presidents Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush, and as Director of the U.S. Speakers Bureau at the United States Information Agency. Ms. McBride is a frequent speaker and commentator on presidential transitions and the operations and history of the White House and its occupants. Tina Chen is an assistant to the President and Chief of Staff to the First Lady, Michelle Obama. Within the Obama administration, she also serves as the Executive Director for the Council on Women and Girls and is a past director of the White House Office of Public Engagement. Chen is the recipient of many awards, including the Leadership Award from the Women's Bar Association of Illinois, the Women of Achievement Award from the Anti-Defamation League, and Chicago Lawyers Person of the Year. Ambassador Meland Revere is the Executive Director of the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security. She served as the first U.S. Ambassador for Global Women's Issues, a position to which she was nominated by President Obama in 2009. She coordinated foreign policy issues and activities relating to the political, economic, and social advancement of women. She played a leadership role in the administration's development of the U.S. National Action Plan on Women, Peace, and Security. President Obama also appointed her to serve as the U.S. representative to the UN Commission on the Status of Women. During the Clinton administration, she served as assistant to the President and Chief of Staff to the First Lady. She also led the effort to establish the President's Interagency Council on Women and was instrumental in the adoption of Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000. She is the co-author of Fast Forward, How Women Can Achieve Power and Purpose. Moderating tonight is Claire Shipman, a journalist, author, and public speaker, an expert on confidence and women's leadership. Her latest book, The Confidence Code, co-authored with Katty Kay of the BBC, was a New York Times bestseller and the subject of an Atlantic magazine cover story. Shipman is a contributor to ABC News, has covered the White House for NBC and CNN, and started her career with 5 years at CNN's Moscow bureau. Throughout the event tonight, please be sure to tag all of your tweets, Snapchats, and Instagrams with the hashtag #GUFirstLadies. Thank you, and please enjoy.
Well done. Thank you all. Thank you for coming. Let me say, those bios are all so impressive, but the bottom line, these are three really powerful women, all right? They know what's going on. I mean, let me tell you, I've worked with all of them, and this is an incredible panel we have here. We were talking a little bit before the event about some of the questions we might ask, and the one I think that really I'm most curious about is, Chief of Staff for the First Lady, what, for all of you, expectation versus reality? All right, what did you think going in? What did you think the job would be like, and how did that match up with what really has happened or happened? We'll start with Milan.
Okay, Claire, but let me, before I delve into that, thank you for coming and agreeing to chair this conversation. Claire, I asked a little earlier how many trips she had made with us when she was the CNN bureau chief to the White House, or the White House correspondent, and we made trips to some 80 countries, and I think Claire was on a good many of them. So she is
I was a lot younger than
really part of this process in a significant way. And for Tina and Anita, this is also special for me because, as I once explained, we belong to a very small club, the Chief of Staff to First Ladies. That's a very small club, just like the First Ladies Club is a very small club. So
it's even smaller.
That's true. It's very special for us all to be together. What did I anticipate and what did it turn out to be? I think, given that I was working for Hillary Clinton, I really anticipated a real significant investment in issues, in policy, in working on all of the things she cared about, certainly children and families significantly, then very significantly moving into global women's issues. But I really did anticipate that it would be a heavy policy undertaking. What I think nobody can anticipate is what it's like in the White House. And I see Lisa Brown here, is now the general counsel here at Georgetown, and she was in the West Wing as the secretary, and all of the papers to the president went through her work, and you have no idea on the outside everything that is involved on the inside. And then one of the hardest things, and I look forward to what Anita and Tina might say about it, is how the First Lady's office actually works with the West Wing, and what some of the pluses and the minuses of that relationship are. But we were very integrated into the overall operations of the White House. We all worked for the president, that was very clear. We might be specifically engaged in the First Lady's office, but first and foremost, we worked for the president. And our work, and I don't know if you're going to go into this further, Claire, and we may tease some of it out, was really integrated into the overall operations of what the priorities of the White House were.
Well, I'll tell you, I envisioned a less intense milieu than what I had experienced in working in the Reagan and first Bush administration, working in the West Wing and in the old executive office building. And I also had a different frame of reference because Nancy Reagan was involved, but her office was actually much smaller. And Barbara Bush had a view of George's work being George's work and her work being her work. So when I was invited by Mrs. Bush to have an interview with her to consider being the Chief of Staff for the second term, I didn't expect the first words out of her mouth to be, "I want to go to Afghanistan." And right then I knew that this would be a very different experience and opportunity than maybe what I had envisioned. And it turned out to be a very policy-oriented, integrated into the work of the West Wing, being an advocate. The First Lady has an enormous platform to be an advocate for issues that she cares about and is best at it when they are integrated into the overall administration's goals, because you're not running a shadow, government. You're trying to support what the president is doing. So my expectation, because I have gone into the job with 2 young children, a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, so I wasn't really anticipating having the schedule that it turned out to be. In 4 years, we traveled to 68 countries together, a total of 77 for her for the 8 years. But it was busy, and it was exciting, and it was terrific. But the expectations going in were different, but the results were something really far more powerful than I thought it would be.
And Tina, what about you?
So my thing is, you see the First Lady and the White House from the exterior. So I'm from Chicago, I'm not from DC. I never expected to be in the White House. So coming to work in the Obama administration was my first experience. And it's a huge platform. It's, on every TV screen, you see, Jay and now Josh, behind the press in the press room, and think it's a really big room, right? And it's a really big house. And clearly, as the president comes walking down that red carpet and to give a statement, it must be a really long hallway. Like, really not. and you see it on Scandal, and you see it on West Wing, and they're walking through long hallways, talking to each other.
Yeah, a lot of space.
They have these big offices, and they're all talking to each other. Like, really not. Everybody's office is really small. Actually, in all seriousness, the physical size of the building is quite small. And on top of that, the resources of the building, both in terms of number of staff and in terms of other kinds of resources, is quite limited. The budget of the White House has gotten increasingly smaller over the years. Congress has not been generous to the White House. And yet the expectation for what you are supposed to project, and it's especially true for First Ladies, the image that you're supposed to project as the spouse of the President of the United States and representing the country and doing issues and being, out there as an advocate with, what are a very limited set of resources. We often say we don't really have the policy, arms, because we don't have a policy, big policy offices. We don't have, budgets, we don't command the budget, and yet, how do you take what the resources you have, and this is, my boss often calls it the shiny bright light that follows her around, and make it to its best use. But it was very surprising to find, here it is, the most important building in the land, and it's both very small, and it doesn't have a lot of resources.
But did it surprise you also, in talking about the impact you can have? Have you been surprised, has Mrs. Obama been surprised? I mean, it's really, the role of a First Lady in some ways is just, the impact is enormous, and you're almost freer in many ways to have an impact and to navigate outside of the system a little bit.
Oh, well, it is. Well, first of all, I think it took her by surprise, and I think all of our bosses sort of the degree to which every little thing that you do, you got that scrutiny on the campaign, but when you walk into the First Lady position and into the White House, the level of scrutiny is so intense, and yet the opportunity, you're right, is so great because everybody's watching what you do. And I think that was the thing that certainly Mrs. Obama grew into, which was how do you make the best use then of those moments? She often says, once I stop talking about my shoes, then they'll start listening about the issues. And how do you take up advantage of that? And we can get into this too, we have had a whole other set of tools for someone who doesn't have a lot of resources. The ability now through social media to have at very little cost, put out a viral video and all of a sudden, you can hit tens of millions of people and it doesn't cost you anything is pretty remarkable. And that's something that, quite frankly, we have an ability in the East Wing to be a little freer. It's easier for us to do a rap video. Of course, the president, I guess, does rap videos now too. It's then its second term, but he didn't in the first term. So, you have that ability to be, a little more relatable and a little more, in the social media moment.
To clarify, if I could, I think it's really interesting to think about this position because there is no job description. There is no salary. There is no appointment. There is no election. And everybody in the United States, I swear, has an opinion of what the First Lady should do, and they're all in contradiction with each other. So somehow coming into this situation, the woman who was there, and so far it's only been a woman in this position, comes there trying to navigate, knowing she's only there by virtue of the election of her husband, and she has to think through, in terms of the administration, its priorities, her experience, her background, her interests, where she can make the best contribution. But it is a very peculiar position if you think about it in terms of really no job description.
Very tricky at times, because you're right, the scrutiny and the expectations is endless, and you're never going to please everybody.
I see that, though, I think it presents, I mean, the way Milan described it, no position description, no salary, all those things, and Tina's description being in the White House and that spotlight on you all the time. It presents a challenge, but it's also an enormous opportunity, because you have the flexibility as First Lady to pick and choose the issues that you really do want to engage in. And you are best at it when you pick things that you have authenticity, you have background, and people relate to you. That doesn't mean the scrutiny won't be there and the questions won't be there about, what are they doing up there in that, that big White House. But there is, an enormous opportunity. And I think more and more, and to Tina's point about the social media and being able to use all the mediums that are available to you right now, instantaneous recognition of what you are doing, that has changed the role of First Lady. There's a greater expectation that Americans have of what the people who occupy this position are doing with it. And long gone are the days that Mamie Eisenhower used to say, Ike runs the country and I turn the pork chops. Americans could never relate to that anymore, no matter who is in that position as presidential spouse.
Well, and it's interesting, the issues, because the First Lady has a little bit of Teflon, right? In her ability to get the press, get the focus, sometimes it's for the shoes or the dress or the hair, but then to be able to shift it and get people focusing on whether it's Let's Move or literacy or women around the world and getting all of us to trail along after. I mean, so all of those, it's enormous. How do you talk a little bit about agenda setting and how do you pick, right? So the authenticity is important, and all of your bosses ultimately really settled on things that feel authentic, but there's got to be a little more to it than that when you're navigating what the...
Well, first, it absolutely starts with authenticity. I mean, and I think all three of our First Ladies did that, where you really do have to do something that feels true to yourself, and comes out of something you really are passionate about and you care about and you can speak personally about. And then I think we all also, our bosses, you want to resonate and be value added to the administration, right? We are in the unelected position, so you want to pick things that, like our Reach Higher, which is right resonant with the education campaign that the president has been doing. So you want to be value added to what's going on there, and you want it to be something that you can make a difference with. Right, so the other piece, so Let Girls Learn as our latest initiative for the Mrs. Obama, was one where girls' education internationally, there's a lot of people doing it. So we spent a while figuring out if we were to go into that space, could we uniquely contribute? Because if we're going to spend time on it, we're going to invest those resources, then you want to do it in a way that will move the dial forward in some fashion and is directly related to your efforts and is not taking away from something else that somebody's already doing.
I guess it hasn't escaped notice that there's a chain here of the women and girls issue internationally with everybody. I mean, it's really been a mantle that it's an issue that resonates right now, and it's one, I guess, that all of your bosses are passionate about.
Well, I think, Claire, it also has to do with the fact that these are absolutely critical issues. We call them soft issues. They're often marginalized, but they're significant issues. And if there isn't leadership targeted to those issues, it's not likely they'll be addressed. And then ultimately, the First Lady may take the lead, but they're really then become very integrated into the overall policies of the president. So I think some of it is the recognition that somebody's really got to play a leadership role here.
So we also want to because I know everybody out here is thinking, how do I get a job like the job you have had? You're all good students wondering, well, how am I going to do that? So talk a little bit about what the day-to-day job is like for you, and was like, is like, and especially that integration. I think Moana or Anita mentioned the integration of East Wing, West Wing politics. I mean, I know a lot of politics to get to the White House, but the politics between East Wing and West Wing can be just as intense once you get there, or tricky to navigate, right? So what is all of that like? I'll start with you, Anita.
I'll just mention two things that were shared with me as I started the job. One was with my predecessor, whom Milan knew. Andy Ball had been Laura Bush's chief of staff when she was First Lady of Texas, and then for the first term. And she had made the decision, if George W. Bush was going to win a second term, she was going back to Texas. Her husband had never moved up here, so she was ready to go back. But the day she was leaving and walking out of the East Wing, and I walked her out the door, and then even though I had worked in the building, I had worked in the White House in 3 administrations now, I was comfortable with the surroundings, I knew my way around, this was not unfamiliar territory, but I was nervous. And she just turned to me and she said, just remember, even on your worst day, remember where you are, and that will really help you, because you're in this small space, but it is really magnificent, and you can move the needle because you have such an opportunity as your temporary custodian of these positions. That I remember. The other point was Andy Card, who was chief of staff to the president at the time, and said to me, gave me the best piece of advice, and it was a very short meeting. He said, remember, you have one client, and that's the First Lady. Do whatever you need to do to make sure she has what she needs and that she's happy. Otherwise, he would hear about it from the president anyway. So those two things really helped to guide me my entire time in the White House as the chief of staff.
Well, I think every member of the White Wing, of the West Wing staff knows who the president speaks to last and with whom he speaks most often, and that is the First Lady. So her perceptions, her understandings, her crisscrossing the country, the world, all of those somehow get transmitted in some way. And that does not go unnoticed. But I always felt that when the First Lady was up, the West Wing staff was very eager to have her engaged in any way possible. When she was down or controversial, it was, oh, you've got a problem on your hands. So there are always these tensions, and it's always like we're the other, even though the other is very much integrated in everything else that's going on. So it's one of those relationships. One of the things I remember, Claire, so well was when we were going to the Beijing Women's Conference in China in 1995. This was a long time ago now as I think about it. And the press, in their inimitable style, was asking, well, what is she going to say? What is she going to say? And had asked the press office at the White House, the chief spokesperson, well, what is she going to say? And the word was, well, she's really not going to make waves. It's not going to be anyway newsworthy, and you know, just go and cover the trip. And but I wouldn't expect anything out of the ordinary. And it had been very controversial going up to getting on the plane, because both the right wing was out to make the conference something other than was intended, to destroy the family, and the other side, the human rights community, was outraged that it was taking place in China, and China is a violation of human rights, yet it was an international conference that happened to be taking place in China. So we're sort of navigating these shoals, and all eyes are on whether or not she's going to go, and it wasn't clear up until the last minute that she was going, because there was an incident with a human rights activist who got arrested in China, and it wasn't until he was released that we were on the plane. Long story short, the press got on the plane, anticipating the fact that while the road to Beijing was not without controversy, obviously this is not going to be a speech that makes waves. And I remember going to the back of the plane and being pummeled with, well, what is she going to say? What is she going to say? And at that point, hardly anybody had seen the speech. It was one of the most closely held operations. And then the Secretary of actually she was the perm rep to the UN at the time, Madeleine Albright, got on the plane and some of the national security people went over the speech, but it was extremely closely held, and we weren't either acknowledging what you had been told or saying it's going to be entirely different. And it wasn't until that speech was delivered that I think anybody understood just the power, the newsworthiness, and the fact that both the Washington Times and the New York Times, which have very little in common, acknowledged that it was her finest moment. But it was, again, the West Wing setting no expectations whatsoever.
That was all very frustrating, by the way, the whole process, no information, all the way to China.
Well, there was another part to this, talk about tensions, when many of my colleagues in the West Wing said, we don't think she should go. There's no percentage in this. She should not go. And after all, it was just before a re-election year. There was more to be nervous about than not be nervous about. And then when the speech happened and she came back and the world was saying, my God, look at America, they were all saying it was their idea that she went.
Well, and that speech, to your point about their spread on women and girls, goes back to that speech. I'm glad you mentioned it, Elaine, because that is a singular moment, a singular historic moment, just globally.
And Tina, from your point of view in terms of your job, what you do every day, what you deal with, putting out fires, getting there, I don't even know how early in the morning, what keeps you up at night? What's your biggest fear you're going to walk in the morning and hear? Is it, something about something in the press? Is it something about some politics going on in the West Wing? What is it that you dread?
Well, actually, it's changed over time. It used to be in the very beginning. It really was like the sort of waking up, thinking you've missed an exam kind of moment. It was like, what detail of an event have we missed, or what person didn't get invited, what part of the speech we've spent many times obsessing over making sure the speech is there, having multiple fail safes in case the teleprompter doesn't work, in case the pages on the book don't work. So there was that. Then it sort of morphed now to what keeps me up at night is what's left undone.
Yeah.
I really think about this a lot. For about the last year, this probably kicked in about a year ago, where I'm really thinking a lot about, very conscious of the dwindling amount of time left, and how very with each day that goes by, how much shorter the time is left to have this platform, and really wanting to make sure that we have left no stone unturned, no issue unaddressed. Really do not want to get to January 2017 and say, God, we could have done this, and we didn't. And that actually is very much top of mind almost every night. Like, what else? What else is there?
What would you say, sorry, put my mic up. What would you say to the next chief of staff to the first lady or first spouse? We have to discuss whether we're ready for that.
He won't be
what would you say, if you were to give sort of the Andy Card advice, or what, the top 2 points, move more quickly, focus on something, what would you say?
Well, I definitely would use the Andy Card line. You have one client, you want to keep them happy. I always worry about the schedule, making sure that we have all the details, all the information, the proper briefing materials for the First Lady too. You have to be prepared, and that is the one thing I think I would tell my successor if I were asked. Just come into the job every day, just being prepared for what's unpredictable, and being also prepared that the urgent has to overtake the important. You might go home at night with a great list, to-do list, 5 or 6 things, or 10 or 20 or 100 that you'll get to when you arrive at 6:45 or 7 in the morning. And invariably, by 7:15, that's completely blown up, and you have to be able to pivot, and that it's okay, because that's what the White House is like, and it tries you and it tests you, but it's the best training in the world, and we'll take it with you forever. But trying to stay on top of details and really empowering the people around you and delegating to them as much as you possibly can, because it's just physically impossible to do it all, but always being responsive to the First Lady, because the heat is always on them. The pressure is on them, the camera is on them, and you've just got to be one step ahead of it all the time.
I would say attention to detail. I mean, for the young people in the audience, it is never too early to really learn how to pay attention to detail, and in every job that you have, to learn how to pay attention to detail. And I was a practicing lawyer before, and that was always important. You know, every site checked, every fact checked, and it's that training, I think, actually more than anything else, that put me in a good place for this job. And I mean, really, it's down to what's the ground like that she's going to have to walk across, because can she wear heels or does she have to wear flats?
Yeah.
It sounds kind of like, what kind of detail is that? But when you have the cameras of the world on you, and you are representing the United States of America in a foreign country, you know, the ability to carry yourself down that walkway is critical. And it's that, you know, it's all the way from that to what is the content of the speech that's going to be a historic, you know,
It runs
making
the
speech
gamut.
on policy. You've got to be able to pivot from one small detail to one huge historic making issue.
I agree. The wardrobe memo was as important as some of the speeches, frankly. It really was. And for us, the equivalent of a nuclear football was that makeup bag. Because they really stepping off a plane, and it may sound insignificant and silly, but it really isn't, because you are, and you're traveling 80 countries around the world. You are the representative of the United States of America and its people at that moment. And I think you do feel the pressure to be as perfect as you possibly can.
We're going to open it up to questions from the audience, as people, there's a mic that's going to come to you, but I want to ask Milan as we pass the mic out. Wait, so we've heard, so Tina has the legal experience. Both of you have an enormous amount of political experience, from campaigns to working for other administrations. Are there other things for the young people out here still thinking about careers that you think are critical to think about in terms of navigating their way toward a White House job?
Well, I think in terms of the job itself, what Mrs. Clinton always reminded us of, and I think really it is the most important thing, you're in a very heady environment, you can't get carried away by where you are, and it was always to say, stay focused on what you're doing. You're here for the American people, and it is a very discrete period of time in which you will be in these positions, and we have to do everything we can to do all that we can to make a difference. And I think in the worst of times and the best of times, that always resonated, because you need to keep your eye on the prize, so to speak. You can get distracted because no 2 days are alike. And the ability to be motivated, to know why you want to do something, not to be in the White House to be in the White House, but to be in the White House because you can make a difference. I think that has really been the best advice.
That's all really useful.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. My name is Rachel, and I'm a junior in the Foreign Service School here at Georgetown. And my question is, it seems like the role of Chief of Staff, well, the first spouse, has very much, in a sense, been defined by the gender of the spouse in terms of, say, worrying about, for example, details about wardrobe, because the way that the media treats women is very different from the way that the media treats men. And the issues that the first spouse focuses on historically has been, as you mentioned, more soft issues that are seen, I suppose, in a sense, more compatible with the First Lady as its advocate. So I was wondering, if we have a first spouse who is not a woman coming in, how do you see that affecting the role of the Chief of Staff in the future? Thank you.
Well, first of all, I think that what you said is not exactly representative of the role. Inasmuch as when Mrs. Clinton was First Lady, and Claire will vouch for this, there was huge debates in newspapers and in news bureaus over how to cover her. Because one day she was in the style section arranging flowers for a state dinner, or deciding what they should be. But the next day she was trying to work on health care reform, which is one of the singular biggest imaginable issues confronting any country, certainly ours, and a huge chunk of the budget. And just generally, you can't imagine a bigger issue to take on. So it wasn't just a women's issue. In that sense, the president had asked her to lead this effort since that was going to be one of the priorities. So I think what has to be understood about this role, as I try to say at the outset, is that yes, it's got all of these connotations to it, but really one has to respect what each First Lady chooses to do and how she chooses to do it. Because there is no job description and her role can be enormously impactful, and it has been. I think if there were a first man in the position, I doubt very much he's going to pick out the china for the state dinners or even tell the flower arranging staff what colors might work for an entertainment that the White House has to hold. But I think it will be conditioned on what his interests are, how he can best promote the agenda of the administration, and where he can be best deployed in the ways that make the most sense. So I think that's how we have to look at this position.
And Tina, and Anita, you also have to be very careful, and I remember going through this with Hillary Clinton, covering her. It isn't a job. I mean, there's no job description.
Right.
So you can't suddenly declare you are running X, what you have to pick the things that are a little bit outside of the bounds of what the administration is. Well, you have to be.
I mean, I think the times when it has worked the best too, is when the First Lady really is in the swim with what the administration's doing. I mean, you are to your best effect when you are amplifying, when you are pursuing something that will further what the president's goals are. Because as Milan said, it's the president's administration. There's only one person in that building who was elected in the entire building. It bears remembering that there's only one person who's elected by the American people. It's the president, and we all are. I mean, it's the best way to function as a staff, whether East Wing or West Wing staff. That is who we are working for, and and quite frankly, first spouses get there because they understand that. They would never have survived a campaign and a national election if they didn't understand that too.
Anita, could you see a point where the first spouse worked? And how much controversy would that be? Somebody has a job as a lawyer, somebody has a job as I could imagine all of us, the press saying, what about this conflict and that conflict?
I think that's coming, and I think we should be prepared for that. I'm a firm believer that the White House adapts to its occupants, and the occupants adapt, to the White House. I do think this, though, if the presidential spouse comes in and has a job outside of the home, essentially, it will be the most superb balancing act that anyone could possibly imagine, because that person will be doing that under the spotlight as well, trying to balance the expectations that we now have for this role, that you do something with that platform, that you support the President of the United States, who truly has every problem in the world comes to the desk of the American president. And they do need the support of the spouse to help highlight an issue or be an advocate or be the person closest to them to travel around the world or around the country. So to balance that with another full-time job will be a challenge. And I think the other complication is, because all of us who know working in the White House, you run afoul very easily of the ethics and the rules, and you're a lawyer, you understand that. So if the spouse has a job earning outside income, works for a private company, whatever it might be, you can be sure the White House lawyers are going to be constantly on what he or she is doing to make sure it doesn't fall afoul of any ethics rules.
Jill Biden teaches.
It's just what I was thinking. I mean, she has paved a way. The role of the spouse of the vice president is somewhat different, but still very much in the spotlight. And I admire, Jill a lot, because she really has carved the time. It's on her calendar. We know exactly when she's teaching. She has also blended the fact that she is a community college teacher really well into the issues, because promoting community college is one of the president's, initiatives, and she currently is chairing, the free community college effort. And he asked her to be the chair of that. So that, there's a way to make those things blend. But I'll just say, for the undercurrent of all this, it's a completely anachronistic job. I mean, at the end of the day, there's a lot about the White House, and Stuart McLaren is here from the White House Historical Association, and it is a wonderful history, and it is a great historic building, and it is still a little bit stuck in history, so incrementally, we're changing that with each, new generation that is coming in. But there are some, as Anita suggests, some big generational shifts that are going to keep happening in that building.
Good evening, I'm Mari Monserrate. I'm with the Office of the Chief of Public Affairs in Army Headquarters. First of all, I want to thank Georgetown for having this wonderful panel for us here tonight. So my question is, as we discussed, the presidents consult with their wives at the end of the day, at the beginning of the day. So when their wife's experience and background is in fashion, such as with Carla Bruni in France, and potentially with Melania Trump here, whose careers are so far removed from public service, and that inevitably hold a not so well regarded public perception, what challenges does the staff have, and what goes on behind the scenes to transform that First Lady's image to one of more credibility as a representative of our country that commands greater public respect and is taken more seriously?
Great question. And sorry, great staff. To do it. I guess I'll just point to one little example. Remember just how hard it was for Nancy Reagan to be taken seriously. That she came here as the wife of a Hollywood actor, a governor who was not believed to be, really all that bright. All that turned out to be wrong, of course. She got off on a really wrong foot by ordering China, by doing a lot of renovations, to the White House, even though much of it was done with private funding. That wasn't understood at the time. The country was in a recession, and she appeared very tone deaf to what was happening. And the only way that she was able to turn that around was by doing something very self-deprecating, and that was dressing up in old clothes and singing at the Gridiron dinner a song called Secondhand Rose, and to the tune of Secondhand Rose, and dressed in secondhand clothes. And all of a sudden, I mean, even that sense of humor helped people see that she understood this was, a bit of a mistake, and she was trying to turn it around. So some of it has to come from the person, no matter how great your staff might be, and they do need to help you navigate these treacherous waters, but you have to be willing to admit you made a mistake too.
But I think about Nancy Reagan because obviously the country just lost her. And she was, in many ways, controversial, as First Ladies can be. But she also made enormous contributions during that period when the Soviet Union was collapsing. There were many around President Reagan who wanted him to take a very hard line against Gorbachev, against what was happening. And I have some friends who were advising at the time, and they said that one day Nancy Reagan, in exasperation, said, "Why does everybody assume my husband's a warmonger?" And they really wanted to seize that moment, as did others in his administration, because there was huge tension in the administration over it. George Shultz was on one side, others were on another side. But her ear, her sensitivity, her knowing where her husband wanted to go in history on the issue, I think was extremely dispositive. And she gets very little credit, at least when she was still First Lady, for what she did to help him navigate all of that, because in many ways she was reputed to be able to call a spade more in terms of people than he was, and that got her into some hot water too. But she played a really, really important role in history.
At the funeral, that remember we were sitting next to each other, that and said, my father could be the good cop because my mother was willing to be the bad cop. And that took a real devotion to the success and the legacy of President Reagan, because she really understood where he wanted to go.
But to your question, you can go through the list of first ladies, and some have been, you know, not the ones who have center stage in the history books for good, and some who have accumulated enormous power to themselves. You know, Mrs. Wilson was called the 28th and a half president, and there were scandals of serious natures. So I think history has a way of, or getting through it and ultimately putting a perspective on it. But there's no magic answer.
I know there is a microphone out here. There we go.
Hi, my name is Megan DeCourcy, and I'm a freshman in the college. Thank you for being here. So my question is, do you see any first ladies from history who have kind of like set the precedent and really have expanded the role to what it is today? Because it wasn't a term that first originated when we had, George Washington as president. It's something that has come to be. So I guess I was just wondering your thoughts on that and who has really given it the power that it has today.
We didn't talk about that today.
And you have the best historical perspective.
Facts on that.
We've all become experts in this role because we kind of lived it. But when we had our pre-panel call, I said, Rosalind Carter gets a lot of credit for making the decision as First Lady to hire the first policy director for a First Lady. And that began to change the view of the office as well. And that particular woman still works with her to this day on the mental health issues. And they've just published the last couple of years their second or third book together on mental health. And Rosalind Carter used to really be, lament the fact that, she couldn't get reporters or interest for the work that she was doing, which was very significant and important. And one of the things that she also worked on that she took with her to the White House from her experience of being the wife of the governor of Georgia, where she worked with another First Lady from Arkansas, Betty Bumpers. They worked on childhood immunization as wives of governors. And when Rosalind Carter came to the U.S. First Lady position, and Betty Bumpers came to Washington as the wife of Senator Dale Bumpers, the two of them continued to team up and really lobbied and worked with the CDC to make immunizations for 2-year-olds. It's called the 2x2 plan, 2 immunizations by 2 years old to be the law of the land. And that still governs us today. And so I think she, is a remarkable woman for what she accomplished, in addition to the ones we know a lot about. Eleanor Roosevelt, of course, broke the mold as well. But each of them, as the land has said, have all added or contributed to this continuum of the role. And Martha Washington is not to be overlooked in this too, because she had the burden of setting the precedent for the role. They didn't even know what they were going to call it.
And I think you have to, maybe it's because I'm so conscious of living in this social media moment that has actually transformed very much our role, even just from Mrs. Bush's role, is how much the tenor, the time, what's the historical moment, what's happening. In a lot of ways, the First Lady probably lives more in the social moment of the country than the president is free to, because the president's on the issues. I mean, there are very set things that they have to do, and they're working on and pushing. And the First Lady is by nature, raising the family, in that social world. And so a lot of, I think, as you see what they do over time, if you looked at historically, will be shaped very much by what is the moment, what's happening out there in the world at the time.
I think there's time for another
Question, but I don't know if anybody has one. Right there. Yes, there.
Hi, I'm Zoe Dowd, and I'm a student in the Master of Latin American Studies. And I have a question about how the role evolves from during the campaigns to during the governing stage, and at what point does that role change and the different challenges that it presents? Thank you for asking that. That was actually another question we discussed in preparation for this, and we didn't have time to get to it. So how does, and then it's tied into your question earlier, which is how does the role of a campaign spouse evolve into the role of
first spouse or first lady. Leanne?
Well, I think certainly you're not thinking about the roles that you may, I hope, will come your way with the election of your husband. You're really focused in that campaign in the intensity of the moments, the days, the months, what it takes. You're very mindful, however, of all of those policy positions, the commitments, what you're hearing along the way, what people are coming and telling you about, and you have this sense, this deep sense of needing not just to capture now the new role, but obligation. And what comes out of it is a real sense that we've committed to all of these things. Let's see them through. The president may not be able to put on the top of his agenda some of the things that came up frequently, because every day something different hits your plate and you're focused on a couple of the big things. But that's where the First Lady can really be a pivot point on some of the critical priorities that otherwise don't become the first things to be worked on. So I think a real understanding, not about governing so much, but of an obligation that comes out of that campaign to begin to fulfill and understand why the president was elected, what is owed the American people, and how they need to work together to accomplish it.
I will say one of the things that I've come to appreciate, sort of having watched this now through, from the back, before there was a glint in the eye that we were going to try to run for president, to watch the evolution, of Mrs. Obama and her role is one of the great beauties of our system is this electoral process. As grueling, and we're all living through it right now, so it may not feel like it's a thing of beauty at the moment, but it really is. The glare of a national campaign prepares you in very unique ways for now the glare of the White House. And it's not, if anybody's run for statewide office, it is just exponentially different to run a nationwide campaign. And you can see the people who are able to make that adjustment, even if there were governors or senators before, and those who cannot, because it is a dramatically different spotlight, and it's a dramatically different platform. And the spouse learns that too through the campaign. And the other beauty of it is, and I've seen this happen, and actually our Joining Forces initiative is a great representation of it, the things that you learn on the campaign, and the President and the First Lady have both talked about this, the things they learned from the roundtables they had in Iowa, to the people that they met with on the road line, those conversations really stay with you as a president and a first lady, and they influence in very real and tangible ways what you hear the people, the country saying to you in very personal ways. There's people that we met on the campaign that really fuel the president's desire on healthcare. People that we met, like Natoma Campbell, from Ohio, who we always come back to, who, was a farmer who, had breast cancer and no health insurance coverage. Joining Forces, our Veterans Initiative came very specifically out of roundtables the First Lady had in Iowa with working families and some of the working spouses who were brought in as part of those, not intentionally, but happened to be military spouses. And the unique difference in their experience stayed with her and completely was the inspiration for her desire, joined with Dr. Biden's, to do something to support military spouses.
But you probably, probably two things though, you have to learn to transition from a fighting stance a little bit to a slower, more welcoming, bipartisan position, right? And also, you probably have to learn a little patience, because you get off the campaign trail and you must have a list of, these are all the things I want to do, and then realizing, all right,
Then you have a big
I have to narrow it down, I have
But
to.
you don't even know your way around the house. That might be the first thing.
You come out of that parade, and you walk into that house.
I mean, I'm the one who goes back the farthest on this panel, and when the Clintons got in the residence, there were no telephones you could dial on your own. It was the most archaic telephone system
computers in the
that one could
There was no
imagine.
Wi-Fi. There was no Wi-Fi when our kids were using
We didn't know what Wi-Fi was in the 90s.
There was not a fax machine in the White House until January 1990.
Talk about reality. This is the reality.
Well, we we need to wrap. We could stay all night, obviously,
But this has been a fantastic panel.
Claire.
Thank
You were
you,
terrific.
thank you for your
Claire,
time.
and the one thing I want to say as sort of the newbie on the panel is that, no, but in all honesty, one of the things that was great, what you see up here, this is obviously not the first time the three of us have talked before, and that's because when I arrived in Washington, from Chicago, brand new, and into this job then, 2 years in, it is my predecessors who really were such a great support. And, there are very few of us who've been through this, and it's important to have that. And regardless of party, it has been really one of the great treasures is to have my predecessors to lean back. And I do to this day. We haven't very recently. I've been asking them both about transition out, and it's been a really wonderful resource.
The untold story. People do get along in Washington.
Yeah.
Can I just add one point to that? Our first ladies all work on things
Yes,
together.
they do.
They have, and they continue
And they continue
to, and
to.
they will.
That's right.
And I think that is a great example, too.
Thank you all. Thank you for coming.
I also want to take this chance to invite you all to a brief reception with us right next door in the Herman Room. It'll be a great chance to have a bite to eat, courtesy of some of our fabulous co-sponsors, and discuss all this great stuff in a little bit more detail. Thank you.